Let me introduce you to my family. My name is Olivia. My mum, Karen, is over there. Apt name, I suppose. Her work and independence are her top priorities. Tom, my dad, is about as helpful as a submarine screen door when it comes to parenting. Jessica, my older sister by 14 years, doesn't give a hoot about my being here. My arrival on this planet was a complete and utter shock. My mother discovered she was pregnant with me at the age of 42. For a while, she blamed menopause. It would appear that the cosmos has a peculiar sense of humor. Too late to take care of it, if you get my meaning, when she dragged herself to the doctor. My best guesses throughout the years led me to believe this. Tom, what the hell are we going to do? Mom presumably squawked and paces the room in fear. My father, being the spineless marvel that he is, most likely simply shrugged. I am uncertain, Karen. It might be a good idea to consult my dad. This is how Grandpa Joe became entangled in all of this. He flies down from Canada to play peacemaker despite his wealthy lifestyle. Karen, Tom, listen, he must have uttered indecipherably, "This isn't going according to your plans," but I still think it's occurring. Just give this child a chance and I'll help you out financially. Due to her career-obsessed nature, Mom likely puffed and puffled before consenting. Fine, but I'm not letting this kid derail my life. It was so that I, Olivia, arrived into this world, you esteemed guests. I was born prematurely with a slew of health issues and into a family that treated me like a burden. I spent most of my early days in the hospital rather than at home. Mother rarely showed up because she just couldn't be bothered. The responsibility of monitoring my incubator was alternated between my dad and Aunt Sarah. I have never encountered a saint like Aunt Sarah. While my mother was likely busy making deals and advancing in her career, my grandmother clung to me like a rock since she was childless and single. Through the openings in the incubator, my Aunt Sarah held my little hand and whispered encouraging words. Grandpa Joe swooped in again when it was finally my turn to go home. He obviously felt our home was inadequate for our growing family and proceeded to purchase a new one. It was like being a museum exhibit while I was a kid growing up there. Gaze, but refrain from touching. Stay silent. Keep your existence understated. I quickly discovered that I was not an exhibit component, but rather an undesirable relic that they were unable to remove. No matter what, Mom and Dad worked nonstop. They pretended I was a leech stealing their life force, while in fact I wasn't. The house was invaded by a swarm of nannies. Neither the pleasant nor the unpleasant ones lingered long enough to make a difference. It was almost as if the person residing in the same house as my sister, Jessica, was an unknown. With an age difference of 14 years, she clearly did not want to play the role of big sister. Attempting to hang around in her room while she got ready for college was something I recalled doing when I was probably around 6 years old. "Jessica, can I watch you do your makeup?" While I peered around the doorframe, I inquired. She looked at me quite briefly. "Olivia, no. My schedule is full. Leave me be and play with my toys." However, I would prefer not to participate in the game autonomously. I complained. "Can't we do something together?" She spun around to confront me after slamming her mascara onto the dresser. "Listen, no, we are not pals, all right. Do not think that I am here to amuse you. Find someone to annoy at home." Our sisterly link was pretty well severed at that point. It got worse with Mom. There was a consistent pattern to her daily routine upon returning from work. When she walked in, she would immediately take off her shoes and head straight for the booze cabinet. "Mom," I would shout out, eager to see her, "can we play a game or read a story?" She would pour a big glass of wine for herself and let out a heavy sigh. "Olivia, please don't be so cruel as to ignore my need for solitude. Retire to your room and engage in solo play. You can keep yourself occupied now that you're an adult." "What about Dad?" He assured Mom that he would look after me if she had me. It was a complete farce. He never had the time or energy to hang out with me. His go-to expression evolved into "not now, Olivia." Their argument was once overheard by me. Even though I was in my bed, I sneaked out to have a drink of water. "Tom, you agreed to assist with her." Mom screamed. "I can't do this all on my own." "What do you want from me, Karen?" Dad fired back. "I, too, work nonstop. When I go home, I'm utterly drained. Her dependence is constant." I walked away before I could hear what happened next. I had heard enough to know that they saw me as a responsibility, an imposition, and an unfortunate error that they were unable to escape. Eventually, I gave up trying. Why was it even necessary? I figured out how to occupy my time, keep quiet, and avoid them. Attempting to blend in with my actual family, I slipped into a spectral state as I ambulated through my own house. Aunt Sarah was the one positive thing that happened to me. She lived in the area, so I began to spend increasingly more time there, holidays, weekends, and whatever opportunity I could get my hands on. When I was with Aunt Sarah, I felt understood, listened, and cherished. For hours on end, we would converse, bake cookies, or solve puzzles. Things my parents were never interested in, like my school, friends, and aspirations, were topics she would inquire about. Surprisingly, life often throws unexpected curveballs. At the age of 14, I was attempting to go about my daily life in the emotional wasteland that was my household when my parents revealed something shocking to me. "Olivia," Mom said with an unusually enthusiastic tone, "we have wonderful news. Your sister Jessica is getting married." Dad interjected, his face contorted into a done expression. "And she's pregnant. We're going to be grandparents." I put up a brave front and pretended to be happy, but deep down I was confused about why they were telling me this. "That's great." I mustered up the courage to respond. Mom went on, "We're going to be very busy preparing for the wedding, oblivious to the fact that I am showing no interest. So we want you to stay with your Aunt Sarah for a while." Their comments hit me so hard that I blinked. Due of a wedding, they intended to send me packing? Even though I was hoping for some bad news, it was actually the best thing I'd heard in a long time. "Sure," I replied, attempting to seem nonchalant. "I'd love to stay with Aunt Sarah." I think they were hoping I would resist and were relieved when I finally gave in. Evidently, they had no idea who I was. Aunt Sarah's house was my destination, and I hurriedly packed my belongings, saying, "Unwanted child," as I went. A lot of time passed in a flash. I couldn't care less about the wedding, even if preparations were underway. My new life was keeping me completely occupied. My Aunt Sarah and I used to do a lot of fun things together, like watch films, walk in the park, and cook. She would lend me a hand with my assignments, sit back and let me vent about my day in school, and seem as if she was genuinely interested in what I had to say. It was suddenly the week leading up to Jessica's wedding, and I was 15 years old that year, too. I was awakened that morning by Aunt Sarah's off-key singing and the aroma of freshly made pancakes. In my pajamas, I moaned and made my way downstairs. "Happy birthday, my dear." As she drew me into an embrace that broke my bones, Aunt Sarah yelled out, "I've got a surprise for you." A gorgeously packaged box was her gift to me. "It belonged to your grandpa. Last night he sent it." My grin spread across my face as I ripped open the package to see a shiny new smartphone, the most recent model, of course. My heart was pounding with anticipation as I called Grandpa Joe's number. Hello, birthday girl." The line resounded with his friendly voice. "Do you like your present?" "Does Grandpa like it?" "How wonderful." "I'm incredibly grateful." He finally asked the question I had been dreading after we had been chatting for a while. "So, how did your parents congratulate you?" Not wanting to come clean, I was hesitant. I haven't laid eyes on them just yet. Actually, I was intending to return home shortly. At that point, I guarantee they will say something." On the opposite side of the phone, there was silence. Finally, it makes sense. So instead of going in blind, why not broadcast live from there? Can I join you in celebrating? Returning to my parents' house, I felt a whirlwind of emotions, a mix of excitement and fear. It seemed like the stroll was exactly the right length. Inhaled deeply and activated the live stream on my brand new phone as I rolled onto our street. "Hey, Grandpa." I greeted him with an attempt at an optimism. "Right now I'm heading to visit my parents. I just wanted to say how much I love my new phone." The stroll was filled with my incessant chatter as I filled the empty space with stories about my morning with Aunt Sarah and my upcoming birthday. A feeling of worry, though, settled over me as I drew nearer to our home. "Well, here we are," I said to the camera as I ascended the front stairs. After a brief pause, I pushed the door open. "Maine?" "Elder." "I have returned home." A stillness enveloped me. An air of desolation pervaded the home. As I scowled at the deserted living room, I lowered the camera. Subtly, I said, guess they're not down here. More for my own interest than Grandpa's. I'll check upstairs." My ascent up the stairs reverberated through the otherwise peaceful home. When I finally made it to the top, I saw something strange. Unusually, my room's door was closed. Whenever I was out from home, I would leave it ajar. "That's strange," I remarked as I fumbled for the doorknob. "My door's never closed." I opened it and then stopped moving. I no longer considered the space that welcomed me to be my own. What had been gentle lavender on the walls was now a light blue. All of my posters had been changed with these adorable animal prints. A white cot had taken the place of my bed. What the hell? I stumbled backwards as I gasped. As I whirled around, attempting to comprehend what I was witnessing, the phone almost fell from my hand. "I don't think this is right. This is where I sleep." I heard a door open behind me at that moment. Whirling around, I saw my parents coming out of their bedroom, astonished to see me. "Mom," continued Olivia, her eyes straying between my hand and the phone, "what are you working on here?" Still in amazement at my changed room, I hardly registered her comments. "What happened to my room?" I asked. "Why is blue? Where is all of my stuff?" Dad cleared his voice, appearing uneasy. "Well, you see, Olivia, our first grandson's sister's baby has been assigned this room." Mom nodded, a smile covering her face like plaster. "Yes, isn't it fantastic? Jessica is having a boy, the son your father has always wanted. After the wedding, he will be staying with us here." I thought of myself as having been gutly pounded. Still, where am I meant to sleep? Where's my stuff? Dad waved his hand dismissingly and replied, "Oh, we packed your things. Down basement. They are in boxes. You ought to pack them when you go. We don't want them piling around the house." Not sure what I was hearing, I fixed my gaze on them. "Leave? Leave what you mean? My house is where I live." Mom's smile wavered briefly before she pushed it back into line. "Olivia, darling, you have to realize, well, there's just no room for you here longer with Jessica and her husband living here and the baby en route." My head whirling from what I had just heard, I stood there stunned. Abruptly, a wave of wrath surged inside me, overcoming shock. "No," I answered with shaky voice. "No, I am not going to go. I also live at this house. You cannot toss me like I am nothing." Mom's phony grin disappeared, then she looked annoyed. "Olivia, for heaven's sake, don't be tough. Difficult." I turned back and spat. "You're kicking me out on my birthday. You hardly remembered at all, did you?" Dad started to roll his eyes. "Your birthday? That is the focus of this outburst. We have not time for this garbage." Their callousness was like a physical blow. Tears started to fill my eyes, but I blinked them fiercely back. "How can you be so nasty? Your daughter is here." Mom said, "A daughter we never wanted," her composure at last breaking. Do you know roughly how much you have cost us? How much focus you have required? We're tired, Olivia." Dad nodded, his face pinched with irritation. "We wanted no more children, second included. You were an error and an accident, and now we at last have the opportunity for the family we have always desired." Their comments cut deeply, every one a scalpel to my heart. In startled silence, I watched as they started shoving the bags they had packed with my stuff out the front door. Mom said, wiping off her hands, "There. Now gather your belongings and visit your priceless Aunt Sarah. Let her cope with you. She loves you so very much." I found myself unable to move. I found it difficult to breathe. This had to be a nightmare. It cannot be happening. "What are you waiting for?" Dad barked. "Get away. We don't need you here confusing things. We have a wedding to get ready." That is when the dam collapsed. Tears ran down my face as their rejection fell over me with full weight. "How might you treat me?" I sobbed. "Your child is me?" "Stop it!" Mom snarled and glanced frantically towards the windows. "You're embarrassing us here. The neighbors will listen." "Good," I yelled out among my tears. "Let them listen. Tell everyone the true nature of yourself." Dad grabbed my arm and his fingers hurtingly dug in. "That's enough," he snared, almost yanking me to the door. "Get out right now. Never come back." One last shove brought me to the front porch, my things strewn all over. The door closed behind me with a finality that matched my own bones. I wonder how long I stayed on the steps crying. I finally got ready and began the protracted, terrible walk back to Aunt Sarah's. More than just my belongings weighed down the suitcases, felt to be absolutely heavy. Trudging along, sniffling and wiping my eyes, a familiar voice abruptly pierced through my suffering. "Olivia, could you hear me?" I jumped, looking about madly, then realized my phone was producing the voice. I jumbled with terror and recalled the live broadcast. Grandpa had observed everything. "Grandpa?" I stammered, trembling hands lifting the phone. "Oh, sweetheart," he exclaimed, his voice vibrantly emotional. "I really apologize for having you go through that. Look, I guarantee we will sort this out. Right now, visit Sarah's. In a few days, we will see each other at the wedding, right? Try to somewhat enjoy your birthday." His comments helped me to somewhat cool off. My tears had mostly gone by the time I got to Aunt Sarah's. She looked at me once, standing there with my bags and fluffy eyes, then drew me into a strong hug. Bless her heart, Aunt Sarah insisted we mark my birthday appropriately. She cooked a cake, let me invite some friends over, and try to make the day memorable. The day Jessica was married arrived. Of course, I hadn't been invited, but Aunt Sarah insisted we travel regardless. So there I was, looking like an imposter as we entered the reception hall, dressed in my nicest gown. Grandpa Joe caught me practically right away. Sitting at a table close to the front, he had a back ramrod straight and exuded a nervousness. The newlyweds arrived grandly before we even had time to say hello. Clutching to her new husband's arm, Jessica looked brilliant in her white gown. Mom and Dad followed, pride clearly on their faces, and my chest hurt. The event moved through toasts, dinner, and customary celebrations. Grandpa Joe got up out of nowhere as the congrats started during the celebratory dinner. His voice resounding across the hall, he said, "I have something to say." Every head looked at different directions. Looking perplexed were Jessica and her fiancé. Mom and Dad started to fade. Grandpa Joe commanded the microphone from the astonished best man as he marched to the front of the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said at first, "I'm sorry for stopping this happy event, but a serious injustice has to be corrected." He then started a thorough narrative about my parents' treatment of me. From their displeasure of my birth to the nasty way they had booted me off on my birthday, he'd omitted no detail. The guests' emotions moved from uncertainty to shock to indignation with every phrase. Mom tried to intercede, her face beetroot crimson. Right now, Jessica was crying, mascara pouring down her cheeks. Her new mate shifted in his seat, looking awkward. The visitors were whispering among themselves and staring shocked at my parents. Grandpa turned to face my parents squarely, his voice as icy. "Let me thus clearly state this. I'm shifting my will. Every dollar I have will go to Olivia and Sarah. Tom, Karen, Jessica, you're cut off absolutely." The reception hall broke into anarchy. Mom started to cry strangled. Dad's face went a startling purple. Jessica moaned something about her wrecked wedding. Grandpa, nevertheless, wasn't done. Shocked by the display, he moved to where Aunt Sarah and I were seated. "Come on, girls," he murmured gently. "We are departing. We need not stay where we are not desired." Dazed, I got up and trailed him. Every eye was staring at me as we made our way out. Others were judgmental. Some were empathetic. I locked my eyes on Grandpa's rear, trying not to cry. I woke up the morning following the wedding catastrophe to hear relentless hammering on Aunt Sarah's front door. Bleary-eyed and still processing the events of the previous day, I staggered downstairs to find Mom and Dad on the porch, looking a strange mix of frantic and apologetic. Mom crooned, her voice sickly sweet, "Olivia, sweetie, we ought to chat. Honey, we wanted you to come home. We sincerely regret all of this. We truly do adore you." An explosion of wrath shot through my chest. "Love me. You ejected me. You remarked. I was a mistake." Each one more pitiful than the next, they started a litany of apologies and explanations. But as I stood there hearing their cries of desperation, it dawned on me like a ton of bricks. "This isn't about me, at least not exactly," I remarked, stopping Dad in the sentence. "This relates to inheritance, isn't it?" Their expressions sank to match my doubts. "There once were Grandpa's money, not mine. Back off." "Get out," I yelled, my voice trembling with rage. "I want never to see either of you ever again." To help me slow down my rushing heart, I pushed the door in their faces and leaned against it. Still, my parents were not finished. They showed up often over the next few days, each time more insistingly than the last. They tried to rope in other family members to persuade me, called, sent emails even. About 1 week following the wedding, all came to a head. Heard activity outside while home alone. I watched, horrified, Mom and Dad attempting to push their way past Aunt Sarah, who had just returned from the grocery shop. "Her is our daughter." Dad was screaming, "You cannot keep her away from us." I felt something crack in me. Having enough of their lies, manipulation, and newfound concern for my well-being now that money was on the line. "Aunt Sarah," I yelled, my voice stronger than I felt, "I want you to be my legal guardians." For a minute the words hung in the air. Then Aunt Sarah's face opened in a broad smile. "Oh, sweetheart," she remarked, "I would be honored." We called a lawyer the very following day with Aunt Sarah's assistance. The procedure was not simple. Forms to complete, interviews to schedule, and a court hearing to attend. But through it all, I clung to one piece of evidence, the footage from my unfortunate birthday trip home, that I felt would be absolutely crucial. When the court hearing day arrived, I started to feel queasy. Of course, my folks were there, fully committed loving parents to the hilt. The courtroom's tone shifted, though, when the judge requested proof, and we aired that video showing me booted out and told I was unwelcome. The way the judge witnessed my parents callously fling me aside will never fade. She turned to them, her countenance harsh, when the movie stopped. "In all my years on the bench," she remarked, "I have hardly seen such a clear case of parental neglect and emotional abuse." After that, the decision arrived quickly. My parents' rights were revoked and Aunt Sarah was awarded complete legal guardianship. I felt weight release from my shoulders as the gavel dropped. I was free of their poison for the first time in my life. Funny as life is, it circles back. Grandpa Joe summoned us over to his lawyer's office just as I felt the drama was at last over. I felt uneasy sitting in the soft leather recliners surrounded by mahogany bookcases and the scent of ancient paper. Grandpa started, his voice serious but his eyes glittering. "Olivia, Sarah," he said, "I want you both to know that I have changed my will." He nodded to his attorney, who drew out a hefty file. "As I promised at the wedding," Grandpa said, "I have chosen to bequeath you to my whole estate. Todd and Karen formally get disinherited." Stated there, shocked. Grandpa had threatened this at the wedding, and I knew he had meant it, but I never truly thought he would follow through. My thoughts whirling with the ramifications of what had just happened, my phone rang as we exited the lawyer's office. "Jessica, is it? How could you treat me this way?" She yelled right away at my response. "You've messed everything." With pain at her volume, I drew the phone away from my ear. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb," she said sharply. "You turned Grandpa against our direction. He's now leaving all to you and Aunt Sarah. It's unfair. I also want my share." I got a glimpse of rage. She had the nerve to ask money after all that had transpired and after their treatment of me. "Jessica," I continued, trying to keep my voice steady, "I didn't ask for any of this. Grandpa made that decision. It was not mine." "But you have to have somehow manipulated him," she said. "You have always harbors envy of me. This is your payback, right?" I inhaled deeply and mentally counted to 10 before answering. "Jessica, I'm sorry you feel that way, but Grandpa's choice had nothing to do with me. You will have to speak with him personally if you wish to change his mind." "Maybe I will," she said, huffing. "And Olivia, don't think this is over. You cannot simply walk in and grab what is rightly ours." I felt a range of emotions, anger, grief, but largely simply weariness as she hung up. I then resolved to give my future top priority. Driven to pass tests and go into a decent college, I poured myself into my studies. Aunt Sarah assisted me with school, major, and scholarship research. Sure, my family's circumstances were far from ideal. With Jessica, my parents, and the inheritance down the road, drama would most likely abound. For now, though, I had a loving house with Aunt Sarah and Grandpa Joe, a bright future ahead of me, and the will to meet whatever obstacles presented.